Welcome to week 2, everyone. Today we're going to go over chapter 2 and talk about government agencies that are going to impact the hospitality industry. As we go through these, you'll see a lot of different agencies with abbreviations. You can also find these with better definitions inside of the Quizlet flashcards that I send you each week. You can find the link to that in your course content under chapter 2. And you can visit that and look through flashcards and different ways to learn those types of things. So, with that said, let's get into chapter 2. First off, some of the things that you're going to see and the different types of agencies that we're going to talk about today: federal agencies, state regulatory agencies, even on the local level agencies, oversight of complete travel and tourism impacts both the national and the international travel and tourism oversight. We're going to talk about just briefly how to manage, conflict regulations between some of these agencies. We'll go over how to respond to a inquiry, and then also monitoring regulatory change. Ways to do that through a little case study, and then we will talk about the discussion board for this week and what would you do. That's found at the end of chapter 2 on page 43. So, diving right into it, federal regulatory and administrative agencies that we're going to see most often. One of those is going to be the IRS. The IRS is, I guess you could say, the granddaddy of them all. When the IRS comes speaking, you listen. Word to the wise, we see this with the telephone scams, especially we see it on the news with the elderly and things like that. But just a reminder that if the IRS comes looking for you, it will be by mail first, and then they'll come in person second. They will never call you and ask for information. Just remember that. But the IRS basically is this collection agency, but I also like to think of us as the collection agency. We actually do all of their work for them for free. We collect all the taxes. We track everything that we do. We have to follow all of their laws, and then we actually have to report all this back to them on their terms. The IRS can be really difficult to deal with if you're not prepared. So if issues with the IRS come up, you should seriously consider counsel or making sure that you have your ducks in a row, for lack of a better term, before dealing with them individually. Osha is another one. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And to be honest with you, OSHA comes in and tells you what's wrong with your process and everything you need to do to fix it. Again, better definitions can be found in our Quizlet, but for the purposes of this, we're just going to do a brief overview of each. I actually have a little chart diagram right here for you to prove what OSHA does. As you can see in the background there was once just a cowboy and his horse. You can see after one day with OSHA what happens. They come in, tell you what all's wrong with your process and how you must fix it in order to maintain operation. Okay, everything that they do is to help you and your employees as well as your patrons. Sometimes it doesn't seem like that. Sometimes they seem like a stick in the mud or overkill, but at the end of the day, they're regulated the same as most of these others, where their funding comes from being able to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, and if not, they'll fine you for it or shut you down altogether. So that's just a little funny diagram for OSHA. A few more federal regulatory and administrative type agencies: the EPA, FDA, EEOC, and the TTB. Don't deal with the EPA too much unless you're going to be building on some kind of federal land or reserve, or try to get something distinguished like that. The FDA is a big thing. It's usually a lot of it's for labeling, also some recipes and things like that. The EOC is a big one, especially if you're going to own your own business. You have to be an equal opportunity employer. You can't discriminate against anyone or anything in the workplace. You have to maintain that you're doing everything you're supposed to that way. The Alcohol, Tobacco, and Trade Bureau, that's the TTB for short. They provide all of our laws for alcohol and tobacco. they require monthly reports. I can speak from experience. They're they're an agency that likes everything done a certain way, so they mostly provide all of your forms and documents in a standard way for you, so they're making sure everything comes in the same. Other federal regulatory and administrative agencies, I know there's a lot. The main one we're going to talk on right here is the Department of Labor. As you can see, we bullet pointed those out because this is one that we work with the most in business. We report wages and hours to them, employee benefits, any kind of unemployment, plant closings and layoffs goes to them. The Employee Polygraph Protection Act, Family FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave Act, all of that comes right back to the Department of Labor. You will see that a lot in business. Some state regulatory agencies that we see, the Employment Security Agency, the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, the ABC, right? You see ABC stores, that's what it stands for. The Treasury Department, Attorney General, Public Health Department, the Department of Transportation. So just a few of, highlight a few of those. DHEC is obviously very important. They're gonna, they're gonna come in and make sure that we're up to code on everything that we're doing. Oh, excuse me. Let me get back onto that. ABC, learn these laws for each market. I apologize, got ahead of myself there. But when it comes to the ABC, make sure you know the laws for your area, your market. Okay, if you're just going to be in the state of South Carolina, you need to know what the ABC laws are for the state of South Carolina. If you're going to have a market outside of the state, let's say you transport things across state lines, just make sure you know what those laws are. Again, in case something were to come up. Department of Transportation, same thing. Doesn't seem like you might need that a lot, but let's say you have a catering company and you're based here in Greenville, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to cater a couple of these things in Atlanta or Charlotte or just right across the state line, Hartwell or whatever it might be. Department of Transportation a lot of times requires you to register your vehicle with them, and there are fees that go along with that. So if you just do it once, twice, a year, something like that, it's probably not worth it. Maybe you just rent a vehicle to do it. But if you're using your own personal vehicle or vehicles paid for by your company, the DOT is going to require you to have stickers and any way to identify you as a business vendor. Now, local regulatory and administrative agencies. Health and sanitation, obviously that's DHEC. We know that's very important. You're taught that here at Greenville Tech in mostly every class. But they're gonna pop up when you least expect it. That's why you always have to be prepared for them. So many types of things and changes that you may do in your restaurant, bar, hotel, lobby, lounge, whatever it might be. DHEC has a finger on that. And a lot of times you have to be, not only prepared for the initial visit to receive a DHEC permit, but DHEC can also drop in at any time and hold up all of your business if you don't meet their standards and qualifications. Building and zoning, it is what it says it is. It's required for any major project. It could be open, closing, operating, anything like that. If you're opening a brand new place, the occupancy permit is going to come from your local building and zoning departments. Your fire department, law enforcement, those are two types of things that, the fire department is going to come out and do your annual, inspections, make sure everything's safe and up to code. Law enforcement is going to be someone that might come out if you have a break-in or something like that. And then obviously your tax collector. One thing I could say about that is when it comes time to collect taxes, they will be on time every time. A few other government agencies, the FTC, CDC, Department of Commerce. The FTC really makes sure that everybody is fair. We don't have any monopolies out there. We talked about the Department of Transportation. Treasury Department obviously is going to have to do with our money. Homeland Security, if you're doing what you're doing as an equal opportunity employer and doing background checks on all of your employees and making sure that you have all of the required documentation, then you shouldn't hear too much from the DHS. Just a few things here. International organizations, these provide oversight for pretty much the entire travel and tourism sector. but the World Tourism Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the World Health Organization. So you don't really think about the World Health Organization as much, but when it comes to travel and tourism, they are a little more involved, especially with the Healthy People 2030. Uh, Managing conflicting regulations. So I know a lot of us have typically heard that state law trumps federal law. And while that's partly true, it's both fact and fiction. Um, the best thing you can always do is, what they say, do what mama said. So the example there is if you want to go out and stay out late and you go to your dad and your dad says, yeah, that's fine. You go to your mom and she says, no, you better err on the side of caution and just go with no. So when regulatory demands conflict, the most restrictive regulation most likely should be followed just until you've sought counsel again and are prepared to defend whatever decision you ultimately make. One example of that, let's hit this first. Responding to an inquiry upon any kind of notification that or violation, make sure that you start by assessing the severity of that complaint and determine if legal consultation may be necessary. So that could be with or without an attorney. My rule of thumb is whenever an inquiry comes through, go ahead and start a file for that inquiry. Get you a calendar for it, whether it's printed or whatever you need to do, and go ahead and put pertinent dates in there. Because once you get this type of inquiry, there is no sweeping it under the rug. There is no I'll get to it later. You need to begin to address this immediately. And when you're assessing the severity, go ahead and do your own small internal investigation. There may be video out there. There may be emails. There may be other types of paper trails. There could be your employee testimony or other customer testimony, whatever it might be. To stay on top of it, go ahead and do a little bit so that you can help determine the severity of it and if you need an action plan that involves an attorney or not. Okay, and again, err on the side of caution there. So when we talked about just a few slides ago about managing conflicting regulations, right? One thing that comes to mind is marijuana use. So this is an example of, think about it this way. Your state recently passed a law allowing the use of marijuana and cannabis for medicinal purposes. However, the federal law under the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 says that cannabis has no accepted medical use and is illegal for any reason. So how does one justify complying with the state law that is less restrictive to the federal law? How do you square up that conflict? And again, a lot of times we've heard that state law trumps federal law. We really see that right now with the mask mandate policy and the vaccine policy. Now, I'm not getting into politics with you here, but that's the way we see it. The state of South Carolina said, no, we're not mandating either one of these things. But the federal government says, oh, yes, you will. Well, as of right now, everything's tied up in the legal system, and we'll see how that prevails. But with, marijuana, let's say for the instance of Colorado, they allow marijuana for both recreational and medicinal purposes. The state of South Carolina does not. Where does federal law link into that? Think about that and what would you do? Now, this is not the what would you do for our discussion board this week. We'll talk about that a little bit now. Basically, the discussion board for this week is going to come from the what would you do on page 43, chapter 2, page 43. And it's about could be a highly sensitive subject for some people, but it involves an incident of a college student that has a binge drinking accident that leads to outrage in the community. There are 5 questions to ask yourself based on what you read. You're going to go to the discussion board and answer those 5 questions. We'll look through those and see what you put. Please, you're not required to reply to someone else, but please feel free to go and see what other people are writing and see how that changes what you think. And I'll try to go in and give feedback to as many of those as I can as possible, just on what I think. Because in the instance of something like this, there might not be a right or wrong answer. It may seem like all the answers are wrong, but it does get us thinking. Because again, the point of this class is not to make you a lawyer. It's to help you understand what potential conflicts and incidents and accidents and things could happen to you